It is undeniably one of the most iconic, unforgettable, and deeply emotional images in the entire history of modern cinema. A dying, exhausted American captain, severely wounded and slumped helplessly in the burning rubble of a destroyed French village, slowly raising a battered pistol against an advancing 56-ton German Tiger tank. His hands are violently shaking from shock and massive blood loss. He pulls the heavy trigger. Bang! The massive steel Leviathan keeps rolling forward, entirely unbothered by the small arms fire. He pulls it again. Bang! The heavy tank crushes closer to him. And then, miraculously, on the third deliberate shot, the entire tank violently erupts into a massive, catastrophic fireball. For years following the initial theatrical release of Saving Private Ryan, a highly persistent, ridiculous myth actually haunted this beloved movie, with thousands of casual viewers genuinely believing that a World War II pistol literally blew up a heavy battle tank. Let us immediately clarify the actual physical reality of the legendary scene. It was absolutely not the pistol that destroyed the armor. It was the American P-51 Mustang fighter planes, the highly anticipated Angels on our shoulders, dropping precision high-explosive bombs from the clear sky that actually shattered the heavy German tank. But this undeniable reality raises a brilliant, fascinating cinematic question for audiences today. If brilliant director Steven Spielberg knew perfectly well that the roaring fighter planes did the actual lethal work, why did he deliberately focus his camera so intimately on the shaking pistol in Tom Hanks's bleeding hand, creating such a powerful, deeply resonant visual moment for the viewer? To understand why this specific piece of steel was chosen for the most important shot in the movie, we have to look past the Hollywood script and dig deep into the brutal, mechanical soul of the weapon itself. To fully comprehend the immense historical gravitas of the M1911 A1 pistol, we must examine the brutal military doctrine that birthed it. At the turn of the 20th century, during the bloody Philippine-American War, the United States military realized they had a catastrophic problem. Their standard-issue double-action .38 caliber service revolvers simply lacked the kinetic stopping power required to immediately drop fiercely charging, adrenaline-fueled enemy combatants in close-quarters jungle warfare. The military desperately demanded a brand-new, uncompromising weapon that delivered massive, undeniable, instant kinetic trauma. Legendary firearms savant John Moses Browning answered the military's call by engineering the ultimate heavy metal American sidearm. He built a rugged, short-recoil operated semi-automatic pistol chambered in the devastating new .45 ACP, or automatic Colt pistol, cartridge. It fired a massive, incredibly heavy, 230-grain chunk of slow-moving lead. It reliably held 7 rounds in the magazine, plus 1 in the chamber. Mechanically speaking, it was incredibly heavy, milled from blocks of solid forged carbon steel, and it kicked like an absolute mule when fired. Contrast this blunt, utilitarian instrument of violence with the famous German sidearms of the era, like the iconic Luger P-08. The Luger was an undeniably elegant, highly complex, over-engineered piece of mechanical art that was notoriously prone to quickly jamming if introduced to thick battlefield mud. The 1911, however, was absolutely not elegant. It was a crude, highly reliable, blunt instrument of pure survival. This specific weapon provided a profound psychological safety net for the American GY deployed in the European theater. It was fundamentally the weapon of absolute last resort. If an infantryman was frantically drawing his heavy 1911 from his leather hip holster, it meant his primary rifle was completely empty, the enemy had successfully breached his defensive perimeter, and he was violently fighting for his actual life in the dirt. It was the absolute ultimate close-quarters trench sweeper. But Spielberg didn't just hand Tom Hanks a random prop and yell, "Action." The director and his historical advisors made a highly deliberate, calculated choice to ensure the gun mirrored the exact physical and mental degradation of Captain Miller himself. Steven Spielberg is a master of profound visual storytelling, utilizing every single prop on screen to meticulously reinforce his characters. To thoroughly understand the brilliant synergy here, we must accurately analyze the specific psychology of Captain John Miller. Miller is absolutely not a fearless, indestructible, Hollywood action movie superhero. He is a quiet, reserved high school English teacher from a small town in Pennsylvania whose hands shake uncontrollably from severe, untreated combat, PTSD. He actively hates the war, he hates the relentless killing, and he just wants to go back to his wife. By the time he reaches the final desperate battle at the Rommel Bridge, he is physically exhausted, severely battered, violently bleeding out, and running entirely on empty. Now, look incredibly closely at the specific prop gun clutched in Miller's dying hand. Spielberg did not use a shiny, pristine, factory-new sidearm. The 1911 features a deeply worn, remarkably dull, anti-reflective Parkerized zinc phosphate finish. The diamond checkered wooden grips are visibly scuffed, heavily chipped, and totally covered in dirty combat grease. It visually looks incredibly heavy, deeply scarred, and exceptionally tired. The cinematic parallel Spielberg meticulously draws here is absolute perfection. The gun is the ultimate physical manifestation of Captain Miller. Both the man and the machine have been violently dragged through the bloody, saltwater-soaked sand of Omaha Beach. Both have miraculously survived unimaginable, horrific trauma, facing relentless enemy fire as they stubbornly fought their difficult way across the bloody battlefields of occupied France. And by the time the massive German armor rolls onto that final bridge, both the man and weapon are completely out of ammunition, entirely out of time, and totally out of tactical options. Notice how carefully Miller rarely ever uses his sidearm throughout the entire movie, always vastly preferring to utilize the heavy, rapid suppressive firepower of his reliable .45 caliber Thompson submachine gun in every single major firefight. The secondary pistol only desperately comes out of the leather holster when his trusted Thompson is finally destroyed, his loyal squad is mostly dead, and his physical body is irreversibly broken. For Captain Miller, drawing the 1911 is the absolute, definitive, and undeniable end of the line. The worn-out 1911 was the perfect physical manifestation of the exhausted American soldier. But as the Tiger tank rolled onto the bridge, Spielberg orchestrated a visual illusion so powerful, it accidentally tricked a generation of moviegoers into believing a mechanical impossibility. To fully deconstruct the sheer brilliance of this cinematic climax, we must critically break down the specific framing, editing, and highly disorienting sound design of the scene. Consider exactly how Spielberg strategically frames the German Tiger I tank. To the Allied infantry, the Tiger was a mechanical monster, a heavily armored, seemingly unstoppable steel beast equipped with a devastatingly lethal 88mm main gun that instilled absolute paralyzing historical terror in American troops. Spielberg masterfully shoots the approaching tank from a severe low angle, making it visually look like an unstoppable, towering leviathan aggressively filling the entire movie screen, literally blocking out the sun itself. Spielberg then brutally contrasts this overwhelming mechanical beast with the profound physical vulnerability of Captain Miller. Miller is completely stripped of his protective steel helmet, severely bleeding out from a fatal chest wound, and helplessly sitting in the dirty rubble. He is painfully holding a 2.5-pound piece of forged metal that fires slow, heavy, full metal jacket bullets that will simply bounce harmlessly off the Tiger's 100mm of frontal steel armor. It is the absolute ultimate David and Goliath visual mismatch. Then, Spielberg executes a brilliant rhythmic sleight of hand in the editing room. We clearly hear a high-pitched ringing simulating his severe combat tinnitus. We watch Miller fire. Bang! He pauses. Bang! He pauses, raises the gun slightly higher, and fires a third time. Bang! Instantly, the tank detonates. Understand exactly why Spielberg deliberately timed the P-51 bomb explosion to perfectly sync with the physical recoil of Miller's final, desperate pistol shot. If the roaring fighter planes had loudly swooped in and blown up the tank before Miller fired, he would simply look like a helpless, tragic victim, passively waiting to be rescued by the airborne cavalry. By meticulously forcing him to aggressively fire the pistol at the exact, synchronized millisecond of the massive explosion, Spielberg brilliantly gives the emotional victory directly to Miller. The movie tells us visually, without a single line of dialogue. Yes, the planes dropped the high explosive bomb, but Captain Miller's sheer, uncompromising force of will is what actually destroyed the beast. Spielberg had masterfully used a cinematic sleight of hand to create one of the most triumphant moments in film history. But looking back at that scene today, decades after the movie's release, it reveals a much deeper, profound truth about the legacy of the 1911 and the men who carried it. Captain Miller knew perfectly well his point. 4.5 caliber bullets would never pierce the thick armor of a German Tiger tank. Firing the gun was not a tactical military decision. It was a deeply philosophical one. Shooting the tank with the 1911 was an act of pure defiance. It was a dying, physically broken man looking directly into the terrifying face of an overwhelming mechanical evil and proudly telling the enemy, "I have absolutely nothing left to give. My men are dead, but I will not surrender to you." This ultimately summarizes the enduring legacy of the M1911A1. It isn't the most high-tech gun, it doesn't hold the most ammunition, but it is incredibly heavy, It hits devastatingly hard, and it refuses to quit. It is the perfect mechanical avatar for the resilient American GI of World War II. In the end, a pistol didn't literally blow up a tank. But Steven Spielberg knew the true, lasting cinematic power of that scene wasn't about realistic ballistics or high explosives. It was entirely about the unbreakable spirit of a dying, heroic generation, perfectly channeled through 7 heavy rounds of .45 ACP. Captain Miller didn't need the 1911 to completely destroy the enemy. He just needed it to bravely hold the line until the Angels arrived. What do you think is the most iconic firearm scene in movie history? Is the 1911 still the greatest military sidearm ever made, or has it been replaced by modern polymer pistols? Let us know in the comments.